Shantihi, Shantihi.
Om. May He protect us both. May He cause us both to enjoy the bliss of liberation. May we both exert to find out the true meaning of the scriptures. May our studies be fruitful. May we never quarrel with each other. Om. Peace, peace, peace.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi.
Om. Lead us from unreality of transitory existence to the reality of the eternal self. Lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of spiritual knowledge. Lead us from the fear of death to the knowledge of immortality. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Om. That Brahman is infinite and this universe is infinite. The infinite proceeds from the infinite. Then, taking the infinite universe from the infinite Brahman, it remains as the infinite Brahman alone. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukh Bhag Bhavet. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Om. May all become happy. May all be free from illness. May all see what is auspicious. May no one suffer. Om. Peace, peace, peace.
On behalf of IIT Delhi, I'd like to welcome you all here. International Yoga Day is celebrated annually on June 21 and was declared to be internationally recognized by the United Nations General Assembly on December 11, 2014. Yoga is a physical, mental, and spiritual practice that originated in India. The date of 21 June was suggested for Yoga Day as it is the longest day in the Northern Hemisphere and shares special significance for many parts of the world. Our first event of the evening is a talk on yoga and psychological health by Professor Anju Dhawan. Professor Dhawan is a faculty member at AIIMS and associated with its National Drug Dependence Treatment Center and Department of Psychiatry. She has carried out research projects in the domain of yoga for people with addiction and is quite interested in conducting and promoting research on meditation. She has also organized conferences focusing on scientific research on stress reduction and meditation. She also conducts meditation-based programs as an Art of Living faculty. Now, I'd like to request Professor Rahul Garg to kindly present a token of our gratitude to Professor Dhawan. Now, I'd like to request Professor Dhawan to kindly share with us her thoughts on yoga and psychological health.
Good evening. So, I'm going to be talking about yoga and psychological health. We know this is a discipline that has originated from this part of the world and now is increasingly gaining interest over the last few decades in the West as well. Now, what do we understand by yoga? I can see the posters outside which very well have described some of the limbs of yoga. So, very often when we talk of yoga, the popular understanding is that it's being referred to as mainly the asanas or the meditation. But as shown in the posters outside and what Patanjali described, that yoga constitutes 8 limbs which include self-regulation, training, pranayam being an important aspect of it. So, if we look at the connection between the body and mind, it is quite well established. And as early as 1970s, it was described what is called the relaxation response. We are aware that when a person is faced with stress, the body responds by something called the flight or the fight response. So the sympathetic nervous system or the autonomic nervous system the sympathetic activity increases. Yoga has an effect that is just the opposite to that. So what it does is that there is a triggering of the parasympathetic system and what is called as the relaxation response occurs. So it leads to a hypometabolic state where the heart rate reduces, the respiratory rate reduces, blood pressure reduces, the oxygen metabolism reduces, and so does the skin resistance. Over the years, if you look at this is a PubMed search on a search engine PubMed using the term meditation. And over the years, you can see the research on meditation is increasing. So initially there were very few papers, and in last 8 to 10 years, the number of publication in this area has been increasing substantially. And I'll come to how this has happened. Some of the good, very well reputed universities abroad have also now set up centers for doing research on yoga and meditation or aspects related to it. This is a page from Stanford University where Center for Compassion and Altruism Research, which looks at kind of Buddhist meditation. Similarly, other universities. This is from UCLA and this is S. Vyasa University in India. And tomorrow at AIIMS, I just received a mail today evening that we have a inauguration of a Center for Integrative Medicine which is taking place at AIIMS as well. So a lot of interest in research in this area is now being generated. Now if one looks at studies, there are studies that are looking at people who are well or the studies on wellness and how they can function better or how does yoga impact them. And then there are studies on various kinds of psychiatric disorders because that too is a part of psychological health. So what I discussed right now, the relaxation response, that's a state marker. That means immediately after meditation, these kind of changes are seen. But it is also known that with continued practice of meditation, there are some trait changes which occur in an individual. That means that even if he is not practicing meditation at that point of time, you're not assessing him immediately after meditation. But if you're looking at a person who's been practicing meditation for years altogether, then there are certain changes which are there. There are changes in the baseline basal metabolic rate, better concentrative attention skills, improved self-control and self-monitoring, emotional resilience, which is basically an ability to handle stress and negative life events, and an achievement of what is called more balance in the personality traits or dimensions. And I'll be coming to some of the neurobiological research on this aspect as well. So what is happening at the level of the psychological level is that many of you may be familiar with this or may have noticed that very often when we have a negative mood state, it is associated with certain cognitions or thought processes, what are called dysfunctional cognitions or ruminations. So suddenly, if one is not feeling so good and you look back, what was the reason for my not feeling so good at suddenly 4 p.m. in the evening? It may have been because you could not answer a question in class which was asked and somebody else did that better, and the thought that happened was that, okay, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I didn't put enough hard work, I really need to improve myself, or maybe I'm not intelligent enough. And so these are dysfunctional ruminations, that is making interpretations from incidents, single incidents, one makes interpretations. So these decrease as a result of yoga and meditation. It enhances the ability to deal with negative mood states and emotional well-being, and improves sleep and overall better quality of life. So there are standard instruments which are there to measure quality of life or sleep. WHO has developed a very widely used instrument for measuring quality of life, and such instruments are measured which give subjective report about well-being. Now, this is a study that is based on a kind of yoga program that I am associated with, and this study took place in 2007, where they looked at people who were practicing a kind of yoga intervention called Sudarshan Kriya and Pranayam, and they took a control group which was just relaxing in an armchair. So this is very standard methodology used in medical research, that in order to eliminate the bias which is happening due to the subjects who are involved in the research, they are randomized into a study group and a control group, with efforts to make the control group as comparable in terms of the intervention to the study group, so that then you can look at the differences. So these adults were randomized, and they found that based on certain standard scales like the hospital anxiety depression scale and the stress and energy test, there was lowering in the group which was undergoing the intervention. And this is the stress test where the reduction has occurred in the intervention and the control group remained more or less same, and the optimism score increased in the study group while remained more or less same in the control group at 6 weeks after the beginning of the study. This study I picked up because it referred to engineering students, and I thought it will be interesting for you. This was a study published in 2012 that looked at engineering students and what is the practice of meditation, Sudarshan Kriya and Pranayam did. And they found that it reduced the lipid profile and improved lymphocyte levels, the white blood cell count, which is was increased due to the exam stress, which is actually an indicator of immunity. So that's we have noticed that many times close to stress or near examinations one tends to have more infections. So stress also has an effect on the immunity. Now this is research or a review or meta-analysis of several studies using an intervention called mindfulness based stress reduction. Now mindfulness based intervention is picked up from the Vedic and the Buddhist traditions of meditation, and it has been integrated with psychological interventions to produce what is called the mindfulness based stress reduction. And this review and meta-analysis took 10 studies. It was done in 2009, and they compared to standard relaxation training. The studies had compared, and when they looked at the results from all these studies together, they found that this MBSR was able to reduce stress, ruminative thinking, as well as trait anxiety, the basic temperamental anxiety, and increase the empathy and compassion. So this is interesting that most of the early research was focusing more on anxiety and depression, and then from the Dalai Lama and the Buddhist group, this idea came up that why not study the positive aspects as well. And so compassion and empathy have been some of the components that are being now increasingly studied in research. So looking at the changes in the positive aspects. The criticism which the authors themselves, when they looked at the research, was the quality of the research. And I'll come to some of the methodological issues which are there. So over the years, although the initial studies which were done on transcendental meditation have been criticized because the quality of research at that time, several decades earlier, was not that good. Over the years, it has been improving. But there are some methodological concerns. One major one being that many of these studies are cross-sectional. which have been carried out in long-term meditators, people who have been doing meditation for several thousand hours. And then people said that, is it possible that these people were different to begin with? And that is why we are seeing the differences. So increasingly people said it's important to do longitudinal research, look at people at the baseline and then follow up and see the changes in those people, so that it's not related to just the subjects or the quality of the people who are being studied. Now also various lifestyle diseases have been studied, and this is again a meta-analysis where several studies are taken together, and they found 64 studies that had looked at MBSR and health parameters, and then 20 studies were selected based on the criteria that the research was rigorous enough and good in methodological quality. And these studies found that they covered a lot of disorders including pain, cancer, heart disease, depression, anxiety, and they showed similar effects that it does help. So it was thought that not only in psychiatric disorders, many physical disorders which have associated psychological distress, which is quite well known that cancer or people with chronic disorders may have a lot of psychological distress. It helps in that as well. And now it's being increasingly used for that reason in the West as some part of the interventions that are being carried out. Now coming to the psychiatric disorders and the research on psychiatric disorders. Studies were done in India itself at NIMHANS in Bangalore, where they looked at cases of depression, both mild depression or dysthymia and more severe depression or what is called as melancholia. And these are some of the published articles from those studies. And this one of the studies that I am quoting here had 45 patients with severe depression, and the practitioners of meditation experienced about 2/3 reduction in the depressive symptoms, which was quite good and comparable to what was seen as standard antidepressant therapy, and almost as effective as electroconvulsive therapy, which is one of the standard modalities for treatment of depression. So here the light blue shows the Sudarshan Kriya Pranayam in the study of depression, and the boxes are the ECT or the electroconvulsive therapy, and this is the antidepressant. And they found that it was comparable to antidepressant in terms of the reduction in the severity of depression score based on this particular scale. Another important disorder that has been studied is what is called as post-traumatic stress disorder. People who have been, you might have heard of this or seen it in movies. It's been one of the disorders that has been covered in quite a few of the Hollywood movies. Some of you have heard of this? Anybody here? Okay. So, yeah, you heard of it. So, basically in this disorder, people who have been exposed to severe trauma or stress, they may develop anxiety symptoms which include flashback, remembering of that trauma, and avoidance of those situations, and symptoms of anxiety including physical symptoms like palpitations, and depressive symptoms may also sometimes be there. So this study was carried out in India in tsunami survivors, and they compared a yoga breath intervention with control group, and they found that in the treatment group this was the kind of reduction in scores, while the control group only, in which no intervention was carried out, the reduction in scores was only this much. They had a third group as well, in which yoga was given as an add-on to a standard psychological intervention, and that had results somewhere in between, because the psychological intervention involved exposure to this trauma, and probably so it wasn't helping that much, and it was probably reducing the effect of the yoga intervention. This improvement was maintained at 24 weeks, and so this is a kind of intervention that could help in such cases where immediate help is required. Now this is a study that was carried out in US military veterans, and they were assigned this small sample sizes there, and again those who had post-traumatic stress disorder because of exposure to war situation, and they found reduction in scores, anxiety symptoms and respiratory rate, while the control group did not have this change. They also studied anxiety symptoms. Along with that, they studied eye blink rate and the startle response, and they found that it correlated with the subjective complaints of anxiety and the reduction in those. Like I discussed earlier, about ruminative thinking or distorted cognitions, where one may look at a particular situation and make interpretations, and that is responsible for the low mood. So generalizing from a given situation, I give you a classroom example. So the way to correct that in psychological interventions is called cognitive behavior therapy, where a person keeps a record of his mood, keeps a record of his emotions, and then he tries to, with the help of a therapist, the distorted cognitions are challenged and then altered. This is how cognitive behavior therapy was done till now. But with the integration of meditation or mindfulness, what has happened is, if you know, in meditation what happens is one is supposed to close one's eyes and just be a witness, just observe what is happening, observe the thoughts, and be okay with the thoughts that are there, be okay with the sensations that are there in the body, and just be a witness to those. Now this was an interesting concept for people who were working in the field of psychological interventions, and they picked up this concept. And now what is called the third wave of cognitive behavior therapy, which is basically now looking at thoughts and using the techniques of meditation or mindfulness, and not altering the thoughts but accepting the thoughts. And so the third wave is basically a shift from the earlier methods, and there's increased interest in this. And the example that I gave earlier, mindfulness based stress reduction and mindfulness based cognitive therapy for psychiatric disorders, have used something like that. So basically the techniques have been picked up, and yoga and meditation, they've been used in clinical settings. And much of the research, if you read about it, it says that this is separate from religion, because no aspect of religion has been mixed with it. So this was again a systematic review and meta-analysis of studies on cognitive therapy for mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for psychiatric disorders, where the mindfulness component is basically focusing on being in the present moment and acceptance of thoughts and sensations in the body. And they found that the number of studies were quite few overall when this review was done, but still 4 studies found reduction in major depression, relapses, reduction in residual depressive symptoms in those who had undergone treatment, and reduced anxiety in those with anxiety disorders. This was a study carried out in India in male prisoners from Tihar jail who were suffering from psychiatric disorders but not having any psychotic disorders like depression and anxiety. And they underwent daily program of Sudarshan Kriya Pranayam for 6 weeks, and the control group sat in an armchair with attention on the breath. And they found improvement in the anxiety, depressed mood, positive well-being, general health, etc. And many of these parameters were significantly improved in the study group, even as compared to the control group. Now, as far as improving well-being and resilience is concerned, it is well known in psychology is that the earlier you start, the better it is. So, the resilience should be built in children as early as when they are in school and even pre-teens. So that has been known, and people have worked on various kinds of psychological interventions for that. But if you look at research on yoga and meditation and children, there are very few published papers, because probably since research I showed earlier in this area is relatively new, and research on children has been very scanty. So this was an interesting study that has looked at teenagers and given a yoga based intervention in school setting in the US, and this program called the Youth Empowerment Seminar that includes components of yoga and some group processes, looked at 524 children who underwent yes and 264 controls, and they looked at reduction in impulsiveness, and they found that the yoga participants had reduced impulsiveness after a few weeks of training only. Impulsiveness is something which is very important, because a lot of risk behavior in youth is related to impulsiveness, whether it is initiating smoking or alcohol or other kind of risk behaviors like driving rashly, etc. Now, what does the neurobiological research tell us? There have been studies on EEG, the electroencephalography, that measures the postsynaptic electrical activity in large areas of the cortex. And these studies have largely shown that alpha and theta activities have been linked to different degrees of relaxation and are common findings in meditation. So basically what this shows is that if a person is sleeping, the control group, if they gives, just listening to music, and if they went off to sleep, then it was mainly theta activity, while alpha activity was there in the people who were meditating as well, meaning that they were relaxed, at the same time they were aware, which is very often an experience if you talk to people who are meditating, that they are in a state of deep relaxation. At the same time, they are completely aware of what is happening around them. So if somebody is talking, they know what has been said. And people have seen that even in deep stages of relaxation, this kind of awareness was maintained. Very interestingly, there is a study that is currently being carried out by a student in IIT with one of my colleagues in Department of Psychiatry on Yog Nidra, and looking at the EEG changes and I think fMRI as well. So people have also seen that these alpha rhythms in different areas of the brain are more in synchronization, indicating increased coherence of brain wave activity. And we have someone here who's done some EEG analysis as well, and who's got a background in engineering otherwise. Now, interestingly, what was earlier believed, that the brain is a fixed structure and doesn't change much, but it doesn't really happen like that. What people have now found, that there is neuroplasticity. That means people found that if a person is just juggling for a few weeks, then the areas of the brain that are involved with visual tracking and hand movements start showing a little increase. So any kind of activity which you do over a prolonged period of several days together starts showing some morphometric or structural changes in the brain as well. So that means the brain is very much trainable. And there have been studies on meditation and the brain, and this is a review in 2015 that has looked at 21 studies and on brain changes after meditation in people who are meditating. Most of these studies were cross-sectional comparisons between experienced meditators and controls, but some of the studies, like I said, more recent research has improved in methodological quality, are longitudinal studies as well, which have looked at pre and post. And they have shown that the locations of the effects are quite diverse and cover multiple regions in the brain and large-scale brain networks. And these areas that are involved are those that are associated with attention, those that are associated with stress reduction, emotional regulation, and increased well-being. So this is a midline section of the brain. This is the central part, and this is the outside part of it, and these are some of the areas of the brain where people saw structural changes. This is a small part called amygdala of the brain, which is there in the temporal lobe, and every time we get anxious or stressed, it's the amygdala that becomes active, and in meditators the size of the amygdala reduces. So some of these findings are quite interesting, and I won't go into the names of the brain areas, but it's quite interesting to see that areas that are associated with enhanced meta-awareness, that is awareness about being aware, and body awareness, memory processes and emotional context, self and emotional regulation. These are some of the areas of the brain where people have seen changes. Now these were structural changes. Then there are also studies that have looked at the functional aspects of the brain, and fMRI is one such measure, functional MRI, that looks at the ratio of oxygenated to deoxygenated hemoglobin and can detect changes in blood oxygenation. And these studies have shown that there is effect on attention, emotional regulation, as well as self-awareness. And usually some paradigms are given for that. For instance, a person may be presented pictures of happy faces or sad faces, and then look at what happens to the brain areas. Or auditory stimuli of someone crying, or some pleasant auditory stimuli, and then look at changes in the brain. Now coming to the very briefly the collaborations that we are trying to build up between IIT Delhi and AIIMS. So I mentioned the study on Yoga Nidra that, and I'm working along with Professor Rahul Garg on a study in alcohol dependent subjects. We have worked on a proposal where we are looking at fMRI changes in alcohol dependent individuals randomized into two groups. One group receives the standard intervention and the other group receives an add-on yoga intervention. And we are looking at emotional paradigms, the kind I just mentioned, craving paradigms where a person may be presented pictures related to alcohol and then see what happens. Does it really adding yoga to standard interventions? Does it further reduce the risk of craving? And executive control, that is looking at a person's decision making ability using some standard psychological tests. So this is some of the interesting work, and we've also submitted a proposal on school children and looking at stress parameters and parameters related to emotions and impulsivity, etc. So to summarize, several studies including randomized controlled trials and putting many trials together, what is called a meta-analysis, and systematic reviews have reported the efficacy of meditation based therapies. But people who are looking at this with a narrow lens are also talking about what about non-specific effects. So it's very important that when you are doing a control intervention, non-specific effects such as interaction with the instructor, being part of a group, all that should be there in the control group as well, so that those effects can be eliminated, that the changes that you're seeing are not due to those. Again, use of randomization and more objective methods. What could be an ideal control situation? Is it listening to music? Is it relaxing, sitting in an armchair? Some people have done studies on exercise, because exercise is also supposed to give a high. So future directions include attention while studying controls. One of the important aspects is also looking at dose-response relationships. That means after undergoing yoga intervention, some people discontinue. What happens to them? Those who have been doing for longer years, what happens to them? Very interestingly, people have seen that the part of the brain that is exerting control over the lower centers is more active in novice meditators. But probably over longer term meditators, the amygdala, which I just showed you, becomes smaller, and so this part of the brain now reduces its activity. Maybe because the lower part no longer needs that kind of exercising of control, and the emotional reactivity is reduced because of the amygdala being smaller. So these kind of things, what happens over time to people who drop out, what is the relationship with dose, are some of the interesting questions, and there are a lot of unanswered questions still in this area. Process research is something that is considered very important, and people are talking about first person accounts. That means a meditator giving a very good qualitative description of his own accounts, and from that hypothesis being generated to look at what are the important questions that one needs to address and answer, which and research, taking those aspects into account while planning research. First person accounts. More longitudinal studies, larger sample size, and improving the quality of reporting. These are some of the future directions that research in this area is likely to take. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for those thought-provoking words. Before we proceed to the question and answer session, we have some students from IIT Delhi who would like to share their experiences with regular practicing of yoga with us. So first of all, I'd like to invite Rohan to the stage and share his experience with us.
Hi, I'm Rohan, final year mathematics and computing, and it was really informative speech, ma'am, and it was really great. And I started practicing yoga in my first year, second semester, and yoga for me is not asanas, to be specific. It's more about meditative component, and before this also, I used to practice a lot of exercises, and it did not mean a lot of difference to me. But over a period of time, once the meditative aspect came into this, there was a serious changes which happened to me. And to start with, at the level of body, in my first year, I was like 84 kilos. It was this size, and I've reduced 20. I was reduced like 20 kgs, and it might be the help of hostel food, but still, still it was there. That effect was there. And second thing is that I used to have like acute sinusitis initially, and over a period of time, it has completely declined, and I no more have that infection. And the third thing I would say is that the stamina levels. I represent my hostel in hockey and cricket in my first year and second year. So in first year, when I used to play half the match of hockey, my size also was really big. So in half match, I was done. Like my stamina levels was too low. And in second year, when I started practicing this meditation and this yoga component of that, I used to continuously play 2 games at a stretch. Like I used to play hockey game, and in next half an hour I used to play cricket, and that stamina level improved in me. And coming to the level of mind, if you see, IIT takes a lot of effort to complete, and, and that is there. And being from maths department, I think there were serious efforts to completion of my degree, and it really helped me. And initially in my childhood, the concentration was naturally coming to me, but over a period of time in my JEE preparation, it decreased. And but by like practicing this meditation again, that component is coming, that attention. Once you like read things, you get that, you grasp that aspect is coming again. And the second thing is that intuitive abilities. Initially in your childhood, every person has that intuitive abilities, but over a period of time it dies down. I don't think so why, but it dies down. But again it started improving, and this is there. And one aspect I need to comment is that generally before starting meditation, I used to have a notion that meditation is for the people who are recluse. They don't mean anything in life, and they are so-called the spiritual geeks who leave the worldly pleasures and go to Himalayas and have the matted hair and all that, or the people who don't have anything to do, people who are retired, who have nothing to do in life, so they practice yoga. But I was completely wrong in that aspect, engaging that. And if you see, it's a practical tool, and you have tangible results with that. I think in future many of my friends will share my GPA level 2 increased with practicing of yoga. This is there. There may be various kinds of interventions which might be affecting this. Like ma'am was saying that if you are having that control group and the trial group, there may be various aspects that might be increasing my GPA. But I would definitely say that meditation is one of the component which really contributed to this. And second thing is that the overall well-being and the interaction you have with the people, that really improved in me. The ability to connect with people and to spread that joy, that happiness in people, I think that improved in me. And my last statement is that yoga is not something alien or something. And it is said in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it is said, Yogaha Karmasu Kaushalam. It means anything, any action you do, and you do it with a skill. That is yoga. Yoga is skill in action. So this is my last thoughts, and thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
To read out the experience from one of our graduates. He couldn't be here, but since he's working in a job, so he has a very high-paying salary, and he's in Bengaluru, and he has mailed to us his experience. So I'll just read it out quickly. My experience of yoga started since class 9th, when I used to watch Baba Ramdev on Asta channel. When I was in my 3rd year, I was diagnosed with moderate clinical depression and withdrawn a semester. I was on medication for 6 months, following which I tried Sudarshan Kriya Yoga, and it had little effect on the headache and loss of concentration that I was suffering from. But then I tried Yog Nidra and felt quite relaxed after doing it. it made me feel more relaxed and concentrated. Most of the time, I was not able to complete Yog Nidra because I went to sleep at around 20-25 minutes. But after practicing several times, now I am able to do it completely, and it really makes me feel relaxed. In my job life also, when I feel more stressed, I do Yog Nidra. So in summary, I use Yog Nidra whenever I need to go to sleep or when I need to feel more relaxed and concentrated. And it helped me to overcome the headaches and loss of concentration that I was having when I was suffering from moderate depression. So for the people suffering from insomnia, it can help a lot. So this is what he has to share, that how yogic practices helped him come out of his condition. And if anyone from the audience would like to share her experiences briefly.
So I've been practicing yogic techniques for last 7-8 years, and I had like enormous change in one, the perspective of my outlook of life improves a lot. I think that I feel more connected to people. So it's like sort of a psychological thing. You feel more connected to people around you. You become more empathetic to people around you. You don't like. We are in a part of a rat race, so then you kind of take yourself one step behind from that rat race and start being more empathetic to people around. That is one aspect. Second, physical. So I used to play a lot of sports, badminton and cricket and everything. Upshot of stamina, like Rohan mentioned. Yeah. And third, my concentration improved. I'm not from IIT, I didn't clear IIT, probably my concentration was not that good during my JEE exam. So, but after that, after practicing, I used to like study, and if there is someone just sitting behind me or standing behind me, I was not able to recognize, it was like too much engaged. Then I worked in corporate for like 3-4 years, and at that time I really valued this knowledge that I gained. The practice of yoga and the practice of meditation, like job life is pretty stressful. Your boss is standing on your head and saying, okay, do this, do that. But just with a breathe in, you can just let go of that stress and start working again. That's a very amazing thing. And just like any muscle, brain is a muscle that you have to train. And I study neuroscience nowadays. So the practice of meditation trains this muscle of the brain to actually make you more happy, and the benefits of concentration, improved stamina follows. Thanks a lot.
I'm Shashwat, a third year student. So my experience with yoga started in my second semester when some of my seniors got me acquainted with Surya Namaskar and Pranayama. So first of all, I would like to point out the academic change which came into my life in IIT because of starting yoga. So my GPA in the first semester, it was actually 7.8, and in the second semester it was 9.8. So meaning I studied more, but the thing was that in my first semester I used to, after coming to hostel after the classes, so I used to watch a movie, I used to watch TV series because I wanted to feel refreshed and I was too tired to study. But when I learned Surya Namaskar and Pranayam, in 10 to 15 minutes actually your whole mind and body gets refreshed. So it, like I couldn't procrastinate anymore that I am too tired to study, so I could just study more. Then the next thing which how yoga brought a change in my life was that it actually changed my outlook towards what can be called as religion also. That initially I was a very theocentric person. Like most of us, we are from traditional family backgrounds that we worship God and think that God will let go of all our miseries. But somehow, I don't know how, but after doing meditation, I somehow started believing in the divinity of human beings. And as Rohan sir and sir also pointed out, that it helps you connect with people much easily. So I won't go into much detail, but to sum up, I would say that yoga ultimately, it raises your consciousness, and it's a very good thing. It has benefited me a lot, and thanks everyone.
If anyone has any questions from the talk or the experience sharing, we could ask. No questions at all? Oh, there. You had raised your hand. Actually, I had a question from ma'am, if I could ask. You had referred a lot of studies which highlighted that meditative techniques, they do affect the stress levels, they reduce the stress. But are there also any studies on whether they increase the action orientedness or the positive aspect of activity? Like if meditation is reducing my stress in the exams, so my stress in the exams was because I didn't study properly before. So if it only reduces stress and doesn't encourage me to study, I'll fail and I'll still be happy. So
that's not necessarily true, but yeah, people have looked at, for instance, there are studies on workplace settings, and they have looked at productivity in people after undergoing yoga interventions, and they have found that workplace productivity increases. So it's not just stress levels, it is the productivity. Then there are also studies which have looked at attention concentration specifically. So those things make a difference. As far as exam grades are concerned, school settings there are very few studies, but there are some which have shown. And I'm sure college students there might be more studies if one looks specifically at those.
So if anyone has any questions, you could ask.
Since we heard a lot of first person accounts, so I thought maybe I should also chip in and add to that. So I'm a psychiatrist, and as a psychiatrist I was interested in this practice of meditation as a means of stress reduction and what it does. And for me, when I started practicing, it was a complete eye-opener. That the moment you sit down for 20 minutes and when you get up, your thought processes and cognitions have shifted. And without much effort, that was the thing that I found most interesting. Because one of the challenges that we face in psychological interventions is that a lot of population we deal with is not literate or have very poor literacy in a hospital like AIIMS, let's say. So it's okay that there's a lot of research on cognitive behavior therapy, etc. But how does one do that with our kind of population? That is a challenge. Second is there are very few trained people in those kind of interventions in India. So for me it was very amazing that just the practice for a few minutes actually alters the cognition. Probably just the process of watching the thought processes which one does in meditation brings about a shift towards a more healthy kind of cognition. You know, body has a general tendency for homeostasis, we know that, the physical body. So similarly, maybe the mind has a tendency towards more normative or healthy thoughts if one sits and observes the mind. So basically what is happening, and I think there's a lot of need for demystification of meditation. So just like cycling and swimming, they seem difficult till one does them, but once one has a grip of it, it seems very simple. Why couldn't I do it earlier? So meditation is just sitting and deciding that for some time I'm going to do nothing, just watch. And keeping your body still so that you do not get, and your eyes closed so that you don't get too much distracted by the external. And it's a technique that all of us can learn very easily, and since, so it was quite interesting for me to personally experience this. Yeah.
During meditation practices, the color spectrum in the brain is changing. I saw in the poster during the research study. What is its indicates?
I don't know which, you're talking about some poster. Maybe they're depicting some EEG spectrum or some such thing. Yeah. Yeah, so what I was showing in that is the kind of waves that one sees during meditation are waves that are suggestive of a state of deep relaxation, similar to what one sees in sleep. but continuing of the waves that are suggestive of alertness, which normally disappear if one is sleeping or if one is deeply, maybe listening to music or something like that. So meditation is very typical in that you relax at the same time alert and aware. So the body, its metabolism is quite reduced similar to a state of sleep, still alert and aware.
Anyone else?
I was once recently reading a paper on different stages of meditation, and over there it talked about different stages like the beginner stage, the samadhi stage, and then the insight group and stuff like that. So they used a psychological test called the Ainsworth test or the Rorschach test. So after the samadhi stage, they reported that the people in the Ainsworth test, what happens is they're shown a big lot of things and they have to interpret what they see. So after the samadhi stage, in which the people actually went to a retreat for 30 days or something, they said that it was actually hard for them to find out the images in that slot. So isn't that kind of opposite to increasing the cognitive
No,
ability?
no. See, ink blot or Rorschach test is basically there is that ink blot and people look at it and they draw interpretations. So someone sees two faces, someone sees two rabbits. Then based on data, people have seen these are the common popular responses. And these many movement response, these many color responses, they have that kind of normative data available. Now if someone doesn't show popular responses on many cards, then he is looking at things in a very different kind of way. Or or they are looking at things in too much detail, not seeing the entire structure. Based on that, they diagnose various psychiatric disorders. It's an aid in psychiatric diagnosis. Now probably a mind which is very silent, which doesn't have too much to project of what is might not be able to, might just see it as an ink blot. Which actually if you see in your day-to-day interactions, what do we do? Very often our own belief systems we project onto others. So that's why person A responds to person B in a certain way, while person C sees person B in an entirely different light based on the experiences person A or C has or their thought processes. So it's actually just an ink blot. So maybe, and the state of samadhi is not an easy state to achieve, and probably not such an easy state to. So maybe by virtue of that, I haven't gone through this article, although this may be interesting to see. So probably what I would say is that he's not projecting anything much from his own self. So just so that people have described a state of beingness, a state of beingness, just I am, rather than I am like this, I am happy, I am sad, I believe this, I don't believe this, a state of I am, and people are. It just is, So just taking like it is like that, probably. That's how some of the, first person accounts probably describe it.
Anyone else?
Are there any more questions?
Ma'am, my question is related to the comment you made earlier about this demystification of meditation. So, there is this dichotomy or kind of a dilemma that we, face, especially people like us who do science but are also, deeply connected with yoga. That, science somehow is in a denial mode regarding the mystical aspect, but yoga has, very deep mystical aspect. Although I do agree that, a lot of it can be demystified and, can be put in more proper medical terms. But so the question is that, can science or medical science ever at least stop denying the mystical aspect of yoga, if not accept it wholeheartedly?
I think all these efforts are in that direction, only quantification, using scientific research, at the same time looking at first-person accounts, understanding that science can document a lot of things, but the experiences of an individual are relevant in their own aspect. They cannot, they can't lose their importance.
So we would like to once again thank Professor Dhawan for sparing her valuable time for us. Next, we'll have an introductory session.
Thank you very much.
So next, we'll have an introductory session to inner engineering by Isha Foundation.